Hi, welcome to another episode of The Lord's Delight. Today is a very strange topic. I want to talk about how, as a follower of Christ or a Christian, how do I react when I am in the pitfall or a very low place in my life with respect to searching for God even during that time. Recently, in the past few years, I had to go through a lot of, let's say, circumstances that were mentally challenging, including spending years working for a degree, almost close to 6 years, and then I had to leave without the said degree. And it was not a good circumstance, and whatever I had to face was a shock. Even through that, looking back, I was very sure that God had allowed this in my life, and so the way I handled that circumstance was very different. I'm not saying that I never thought, could have, should have, would have, of many circumstances that I could have reacted in a different way, or we always sometimes in our low points think back and say maybe I should have done this. But on the whole, those things happened only when I was maybe in emotionally low. I knew God had allowed this and I was able to handle that with such faith, and I was like so happy. And fast forward a few years of uncertainty of the next phase of my life, and God had enabled me to handle all those emotional and mental challenges with such grace. It was purely God's grace. And come now, this year, COVID hit, and what ended up happening, almost all members of my family became COVID positive. And going through this struggle is something I've realized that while mental challenges or pressurizing, there is anxiety, I'm able to go relieve of all that at God's feet. But when I am hit with a physical challenge, like in terms of COVID, oh my God, I was exhausted. I still don't have sense of taste or smell. And the kind of physical exhaustion and whatever pain the body goes through, the headaches, the joint aches and whatnot, I handled that so badly. I can tell you that. To the extent that looking back, obviously, thanks be to God, all of us are recovering very well, and at the tail end where we are almost done with this dreaded disease. But while actually going through that physical frustration of not being able to do things that I used to do, I realized something. It makes me such a short-tempered person, and I got irritated quickly. Like in the same circumstances where I would have been patient, I was short with people and cranky. And I also had the same expectations for me when I am normal, how I used to do quiet time, read the Bible and pray. I expected myself to do it like that. There is nothing wrong with it, but I also understand that if I had made allowances for my weakness, instead of expecting myself to fulfill all those in the way that I did it when I was healthy, that went wrong on so many levels, which ended up frustrating me even more and made me think of all the people in the Bible who searched for God when they were sick. The woman who was bleeding for 12 years. Bible literally says that she suffered at the hands of many doctors. She spent so much money. She was breaking all the societal norms. She was still searching for God with all that physical ailments and the disabilities and the pain and suffering. Let's not forget about Bartimaeus, the blind guy, who called out for Christ, and even after being shushed by people around and asked to be quiet, in these physical ailments, these people in the New Testament never stopped searching for God. And if you go back to the Old Testament, you might remember we had talked about in this podcast earlier about Hezekiah. When he was sick, he sought after God. These are just a few examples, and it just amazes me that even in their physical sickness with ailment and suffering, these people sought after Christ. Yes, they were after him for a healing, but they did seek after him. And it was as if easier for me to not seek after him during this sickness physically when I am ill, And I understand that that is one of my pitfalls. I can't just give up on Christ when I am sick. And I also need to understand and have patience with myself and not expect myself to fulfill it in a way that I will do when I am well. I can make allowances. I can lie down and still pray. I can lie down and still read the Bible on my phone. I need to be patient with myself and still seek after God. This is one of the lessons that I learned. And one more thing is, I know many of you out there might be wondering, our God is a God who responds to prayer and answers and is moved by faith. So if I have faith in him, I can't get sick. But I'll tell you what, if that is the only doctrine that you think is right, it's such a wrong thing to convey to people, because that is not biblical. I can't say, oh, I have all this faith, so I'll never be sick. No. In fact, I have seen people who are much more mature than me in their walk with God, much more who have integrity in their walk with Christ, get sick, struggle so badly, and end up in ICU or have negative outcomes. Some of them have lost their life in this fight. That does not mean I have more faith than them. Definitely not. If the biblical doctrine you think that should work is, hey, if I have faith, I shouldn't suffer, that is very much contrary to what the Bible teaches. If it is so, Stephen in the Bible, he would have never been martyred, nor John the Baptist, nor any of Jesus' disciples. I mean, Paul had to go through so much physical suffering, and he even asked God, please remove this thorn in my flesh 3 times, and God said no to him. So I'm not saying that when we call out in faith, God will not heal. He will. But the thing is, you and I don't know in what circumstances how he will respond. That is why we pray. So when we plead for a loved one, sometimes we see him heal. In certain situations, I have seen him give that person a rest from the earthly life. In some situations, I have seen him have them go through, or I wouldn't say have them go through, they'll struggle through a certain phase in life with particular disease like cancer, and some go in remission and they are healed, but their body went through so much of treatment. So what I want to tell you is, God works in different ways, in different circumstances through. Don't put him in a box. I want to tell you, be open. And a lot of times it is harder for us to accept when it is a very close person to us. But the one thing that stands true to this day, no matter what, God is sovereign. So I want to leave you with these 2 points. 1, always be on the lookout for what is the circumstance that prevents you from seeking God. Because if that happens, figure out a way how you can, in that circumstances, still seek God. We are human beings, we fail. I miserably failed in the past 2 weeks in the way I should do quiet time. My sickness cannot be an excuse. So what will happen when I have to physically face something exhausting next time? I'm not sure. But since it has been highlighted to me, right, that I have trouble with this part of my life, I need to focus on it. Maybe do some more, I don't know, get fit. I'm really not sure what I'll do, but I do know this is a pitfall in my life, and I'll try to address it with God's help and grace. The second point is, do not let your faith struggle based on what people think or convey to you, saying, hey, if you have faith, this should be healed, or this circumstance should be going away from your life. Just don't listen to them. Listen to God. That is the 2 points I'm leaving you with. And hopefully by next week, my voice will be okay. And also, thank you for putting up with last week's podcast, which was something that had been brewing on my mind for a while. And I was able to pull this friend in for an interview. And I'll talk to you guys next week with a different episode, and see you then.